Hi besties, my name is Angie, this is my channel, maybe I'll read today, and here we are. Our first day of hell together as friends, as besties, as lovers, because it's February, so it's the month of love. That's the only reason I'm saying that. It is the first day of the Jantes Inferno readathon, and we're gonna see how far we can get in this readathon and how close we can get to escaping the big H. So I already kind of started off on the wrong foot because I had grand ideas of staying up late last night to start reading at midnight to give myself a head start, and or waking up very early this morning to read for a couple of hours before I have to go on with my day. Again, giving myself a head start. Neither of those things happened because I'm a sleepy sheepy. And so when I woke up at 4, I saw that it was 4 and I went back to sleep. And now it's 9 and I have to start working. So that gives me even less time to read. So I'm not saying I goofed it already, but I am saying I'm feeling a little goofy. The first prompt in this readathon is to betray your TBR and to read something that's not from your physical TBR, which is to say a library book. And that's exactly what we're doing. So our first book will be We Will Be Jaguars by Nemonte Nenkimo. And I have a TBR video, so we're not gonna go into every single book unless we're actually talking about it. But I was originally torn between this book and another book, but someone commented on my TBR video saying that the other book is, and I quote, slower than a turtle in peanut butter. And so I decided to push that book off for another prompt because I didn't want to destroy my momentum before I even got started. So shout out to you, Matt, for giving me that heads up. So I'm gonna stop talking so I can actually have some time to read, and we'll check in later this afternoon, probably. Hi friends! It's day 2 of the readathon, and also, coincidentally, it is my birthday. Wow. And I'm a huge believer in curating your perfect day on your birthday. And so that's exactly what we're gonna be doing today. I have a facial scheduled in a couple of hours because I've never had a facial before, and it just feels like the right thing to do when you turn 30. And then there's a couple of shops that I wanna check out. There's this little witchy shop that opened up semi-recently that my sister told me about, and it's relatively close to the spa, so I wanna check that out. And then we're gonna eat good food. We're probably gonna end up at the movies one way or another. And above everything else, we're gonna find some time to read. And I actually have made some progress. Hold on. Here it is. I'm currently on chapter 7 of We Will Be Jaguars, and it's good. It's hard to review a memoir because who am I to make sense of your life, you know? What am I even doing here? But we're following Nemonte's life. We're currently still in her childhood. She grew up in a small village in jungle in Ecuador. Growing up in that village, there has always been a white missionary stationed there. And so a lot of the first couple of chapters is Nemonte reflecting on this white woman's presence and how this white woman weaponized her religion to get these indigenous people to listen to her and to follow her orders. For example, Nemonte's younger brother got sick at a certain point in his childhood where he would be having these seizures, and the natural medicine that her mom was putting together wasn't doing enough. And so they had to go to Rachel, and she said, the only way I'm gonna give you anything is if you go to church. And so for a brief period in time, Nemonte's entire family started going to church. Some people were on board from the jump because they were intrigued by this new culture and these new people. Some people were totally not on board, like her father, who actually dipped out and went hunting on Sundays because he was if their God says that every living thing rests on Sundays, that's gonna make hunting easier for me because all those animals are asleep. I'm gonna take advantage of that, which I thought was iconic. And so they started getting indoctrinated into Christianity, but unfortunately, her younger brother was still experiencing these seizures. And so that's when they finally turned to the shaman person in their village. And he did this thing that I don't fully understand. Basically, he transposed his identity onto the younger brother. And so now he goes by a different name. And now he's far more connected with nature. And he's basically next in line to become the shaman. And at first, that was kind of celebrated within the religion, but like the stronger the presence of Christianity, like the more he was ostracized for these actions and these abilities. And now he's just kind of deemed as like the crazy guy, which I think is so fucked up. But it's the harm of colonization and forcing a religion onto another person and taking away from their own culture. So there's a lot of that in this book. Duh. On a semi-similar note, the introduction of this book was really neat. Basically, when she decided to tell this story, Nemonte's father said, walk down the trail, then veer off into the forest, leaving no tracks, which is basically to say, if you're going to be telling our story, there are stories that have to remain hidden, there are secrets that have to be guarded, and there are names and places that you should not name, which is basically why we don't know exactly where her village is. Or if we do, I'm just not paying close enough attention. But stories are living beings, and you can immortalize your history and your people and your culture by telling these stories. So throughout the book, you can tell that there's this tension within Nemonte of guarding certain secrets and bringing life to the story, which is a really interesting thing to consider when you're like writing your life story. Also, this isn't necessarily a update, but this book also features photos. Through these series of photos, it appears that Nemonte ends up with a white dude. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when I saw that photo, I was just like, wow, another fallen soldier. It happens to the best of us, I guess. All jokes aside, I am interested to find out her relationship with this white dude, because at the moment, as a child, she has so much distrust towards white people, just given the fact that they are destroying their lands. But Nemonte also has a fascination with white people because they have nicer clothes and they have technology and they have a whole bunch of other shit. And so, yeah, her relationship with white people is pretty complicated. So I have about 2 hours before I have to actually leave to go to my facial. So I have two options to kill the time. I could either do the save money option and just read at home for those 2 hours, or I could do the fun option and go somewhere to get a nice hot chockey and then go to my facial. Who knows what I'm gonna do? Let's go get a hot chockey. We're back home. We've had such a long day, and I don't think I vlogged any of it because I was still kind of blissed the fuck out from my facial. Do you notice anything different? Do you like my new face? After the facial, I went to get lunch, and I didn't do anything super glamorous, and it wasn't even a sit-down restaurant in any way. I literally just went to H Mart and bought one of their kimbap sets, and I ate it in my car. But that's just what I really wanted to eat for my birthday, and so that's what I ate. Then we went to the movies. We saw Companion, very good. 10 out of 10, but if you look at my letterbox, it says 4 out of 5. I might bump it up to a 5, I don't know. I had such a good time. It was definitely a me movie, and it was the perfect me birthday movie. And then after that, we went to the witchy store, which was kind of a flop, like don't tell my sister, but like I thought there was gonna be more in it, and it was just a room with a handful of crystals. So that was kind of like, oh, okay, sick. And that's my day. I'm gonna plod around the house and rot for a little bit. And once I get hungry again, I'm gonna get soup from the Ecuadorian deli. And so if you were ever curious about what my perfect day would look like, this is it. We have been making progress in We Will Be Jaguars. With all that driving around, I've been listening to a lot. And I'm currently on page 138. I think it's chapter 14. As of right now, Nemonte is like maybe 14, 15 years old. She's really into this Christianity thing. And I'm saying that in a joking way because like it's a little more nuanced than that. Part of it is because she's a fast learner, so like because she's learning English and Spanish and biblical stuff so quickly, she gets a lot of praise from the church, and that like really validates her and makes her feel good, so she like integrates herself even more into the Christianity circles. And another part of it is because she feels so powerless sometimes in her life. In Christianity, the answer to that is to ask God, right? So she's always praying to God, and yet nothing really changes. So although she's like super involved in this Christianity thing, she's not like a full-on believer because she still hasn't made contact with God. But that doesn't stop her from joining one of the missionary schools. And so she's there, she's learning Bible, she's hanging out with other Christians, and I think something not super cool is about to happen because the missionary school is run by this couple, and Rosalina has to go to Quito for reasons. And while she's out, one of the other girls confides in Nemonte, saying that she really hates it when Rosalina isn't here because Alfredo is not a super cool guy. And so as of right now, nothing has happened to Nemonte, but clearly this guy has a pattern of taking advantage and abusing the girls who join his school. So I fear that something is going to happen to Nemonte in the near chapters because obviously something happened to her friend. It's also really sad to me how Nemonte is losing touch with her family and with her culture, like as she's getting more involved with Christianity. Her mother is very outspoken about how she disapproves of this new relationship, this new endeavor that Nemonte has, but her father is a little bit more reserved about it. But you can tell that like it really hurts them that she is choosing white culture over theirs and over their ancestry and over everything they knew. So much so that when they let Nemonte stay at the missionary school, her father pulls her aside and is like, listen, you're gonna learn a lot here, but like don't forget that there is still so much to learn back home. Like it's a different type of learning, but don't dismiss it just because there's no like money or writing or reading involved. Like it's still as valid. And I think that's really smart and cool of him to take note of. But I'm really enjoying it. I think it's really... Oh no. Yeah, okay, so I just opened my book to skim something, and the thing about Alfredo happens literally on the page that I stopped at. So he does sexually assault her. On that note, I'll see you later. We skipped a couple of days of this readathon as far as vlogging goes. I've been reading this whole time, but I just didn't feel like being on camera every day. So there you have it. But I can tell you that on Saturday, we continued the birthday festivities. And then Sunday, there was a snowstorm. So I stayed home and I read a lot. So over the course of these last couple of days, we have finished We Will Be Jaguars. We are about halfway through our second book, but before we talk about the second book, let's talk about this book. Really, there's not a lot more to say about this book. It is a memoir, so I'm not about to be here to like judge Nemonte's life choices or anything like that, even though yes, I did poke fun at the fact that she did marry a white guy. Guilty as charged. What I can tell you about this book is that once we reach her adulthood, the stories get a little bit more concrete. I feel like the first half of the book was a little bit more vague, which makes sense because your memory of your childhood gets a little fuzzier the older you get. And maybe it was also intentional for the sake of keeping certain detailed secret and guarded from the public. Or perhaps some memories were just too difficult to revisit, because I think at one point Nemonte does mention that a lot of her life in the missionary schools is still a blur to her. She like blocked a lot of it out, which is understandable because what she did share was already pretty traumatic. As we follow her into adulthood, things become a little bit more clearer as far as reading goes, and I feel like I sped through the second half of the book. In the second half of the book, she is realizing that the missionaries and the oil companies are like slowly encroaching onto her village's land, and as she is visiting other parts of the jungle, she is finding out that this has been happening to other villages, so her and a band of other people have decided to create an alliance across different indigenous villages. They realize that they can't fight this battle the way that their ancestors fought, and so they have to fight it the white man's way. Getting a lawyer, documenting things, getting scientists involved, etc., etc. Which is where she meets Michi, her husband. He is an activist. He's actually a relatively cool guy. Like I get it, you know, like once they introduced him and like we saw their relation, this is not a romance book, but you know, like the way he respected her and her culture, and he was always open to learning and never judged. I was like, yeah, if you're growing up in an environment where the only white people you have ever interacted with were judgmental and called you savages and said that you needed to be saved and needed to be fixed, and then you meet a pretty white boy and he just wants to learn and has no judgment and lets you do what you need to do to do what you need to do, yeah, of course you're gonna fall in love with him. And then at a larger level, we follow Nemonte and this alliance as they go against the Ecuadorian government and go against the oil companies, and they save a part of the rainforest. And that was really neat. That was a piece of recent history that I had a very small inkling about, but I didn't have a lot of the details. And so I think this is a really great source. It's like a super subjective point of view, but it's like, you're in the midst of it, which can get a little confusing because like Nemonte throws around different names and different entities and you're like, wait, hold on, what? But like it all comes together. It's just like Nemonte speaking from a place of experience and you're reading it from a place of ignorance. So it's just like information overload, but once you finish processing, you're like there with her. And that's actually what I really loved about this book, because it doesn't just discuss the tensions between an indigenous village and a white missionary, but also the tensions between those two entities and the oil companies. And not only that, but the tensions between indigenous people and the Ecuadorian government. And also the tensions within different indigenous villages and like the uncontacted versus the people who are already involved with oil companies, missionaries, Ecuadorians, etc., etc. It was just a lot of tensions being pulled at different directions. And I think Nemonte did a really great job at describing it and shedding light on all of those tensions. I really enjoyed this. I thought this was really great. And so now we moved on to our next prompt, which is to read a book with a dark cover, where we're reading Mary by Nat Cassidy. And like I said, we're already halfway through, and I read all of this in one day, which is kind of huge. So I'm hoping to be able to read all of this today. But in this book, we're following a woman named Mary, and she's kind of struggling with a lot of like self-esteem. Like there's a lot of larger horror stuff going on, but when we're first introduced to her, we find out that she sees herself as invisible and sees herself as insignificant, and that only results in her making herself smaller, which in turn makes her even more invisible and more forgettable. And the book opens up with her getting fired from her job, and her manager basically says something along the lines of, I was supposed to do this a few weeks ago, but I forgot that you worked here, so I just didn't do it. Which I think really encompasses like her entire vibe in the world that she lives in. So without a job, she goes back home to take care of her dying aunt. And when she returns to her hometown, things start getting weird. She's been seeing hallucinations for a while, but like they get a lot worse when she's in her hometown, and she starts seeing these women who are naked and bloodied with a pillowcase over their head, and they seem to be following her, question mark. And that question mark is a generous question mark, because I know what's going on, and I think Nat Cassidy set it up so that the reader does know what's going on, but like Mary doesn't know what's going on, so I don't know if it's a spoiler if I talk about it, but I'll talk about it anyways, because I really don't think it's a spoiler. But before we get into that, she's in this town, and she's trying to figure out who these women are and how she's connected to them, because she's made it as far as figuring out that these women were victims of this massacre that happened in her hometown just before she was born, which we'll get into. And so now she's trying to figure out, how is she connected to this? She is currently on the hypothesis that she is a reincarnation of one of the victims. And to that I say, no. Mary, you have it all wrong. Because the book actually opened up with this serial killer getting caught, and the cops are surrounding him, and as soon as they shoot him, a baby is born. And that baby is Mary. And so it's like, it's very clear to me that Mary is not a reincarnation of one of the victims. She's the reincarnation of this guy, this serial killer, Damien Cross. And especially because she has this inner voice, which is like a gravelly man's voice who is full of negativity and always telling her she's wrong and trying to convince her to do bad things. And to me, that's very obviously Damien Cross. And so there's not a lot of mystery in this. It's more just like following Mary as she like stumbles through revealing this truth that I've already figured out. And I don't think figure out is the right word to use, because they laid it out so clearly in the beginning that it's not a figuring out, it's a hands it to you. This is the vibe, you know? Do I have to mention anything else about this book? I don't think so. It feels pretty straightforward. I am on chapter 36 of Mary. Mary just found out that she is not a reincarnation of one of the victims, but in fact maybe a reincarnation of the serial killer. We knew this already. It was written as a grand reveal, like it was a real shocking moment for her. But for me, it just kind of, I don't even know if we can count this as a reveal or as a spoiler, given the fact that they like laid this on pretty thick in the first chapter, but I digress. I'm not giving Nat Cassidy enough credit. Like, this is an entertaining story. There's a little bit more mystery to it. What we are slowly finding out is that this town is something of like a religious cult town, question mark. We don't have a lot of information yet because again, Mary is still like slowly unraveling, slowly discovering things. She did just connect with like a local witch historian, and so I think in the next chapter, like a lot is gonna be explained. I guess it's indicative of the story if I'm yawning talking about it. It's fine. I think I'm at a solid 3.5 right now, and I feel like it's gonna stay there. I have about 40% of the book left, so I think I'm gonna listen to the audiobook as I make dinner. Okay, my hand's tired, so that's it for today. Guess who finished Mary in 2 days? This guy. But guess who didn't really like it? Also this guy. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It just felt like, yeah. I really liked the first half, although again, it wasn't a reveal and I knew what was going on from the jump. It was interesting to follow Mary as she's trying to figure this shit out in the first half, but then when she does theoretically figure shit out in the second half, it becomes really like convoluted and about like this cult that follows a serial killer that does like rituals, and it just like felt so like too much. It suffered from the too much gene, to be honest. I don't think Nat Cassidy is the writer for me. There's a lot of writing style choices that they make that I'm not super on board with. However, we are reading another Nat Cassidy book because I set this TBR a few weeks ago and I'm too lazy to figure something else out. Did I skip a book in my TBR? Yes, because I'm counting Mary for both prompts, a book with a dark cover and a book that features violence. In my original TBR, we were supposed to be reading Brickmakers for the book that features violence, but this is a non-linear story and we're doing a bunch of time jumps and character jumps from like chapter to chapter, and I just like don't have the brain power for that right now. So this is going back onto the TBR shelf to be revisited when my brain is less broken, and we're just jumping straight into Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy. And I am currently halfway through. We're on chapter 13 and we're basically following this guy named Abe, and he is driving back home to see his dying grandmother, and on his way he's a little hungies. He needs to pee, and he stops at this gas station. And although there are cars in the parking lot, there's like nobody in the store. And he's like, that's suspicious, that's weird. But his bladder is stronger than his brain. And so he's like, let me just pee really quick and then I'll dip. And when he pees really quick, the bathroom door is locked on the outside. And so he's trapped. And there are moments where some spiders enter the room. He sees an apparition of some sorts. And also there's this guy who's just like sliding notes through the door saying shit like, you'll be glad you stayed in there, and what's up, doc, and shit like that. And so I went into this book not really knowing what it was about, and it appears to be some kind of like escape room kind of situation. At this point, Abe has left the bathroom momentarily and he saw the person who's orchestrating all of this, and it's this guy who has like a ski mask covered in googly eyes. And Abe got scared, so he ran back into the bathroom. And that's kind of where we're at now. I don't feel very strongly about this book in the same way that I didn't really feel very strongly about Mary. And what I think it means is I don't really feel very strongly about Nat Cassidy. I don't love his characters very much, and I don't love his use and or dependency on like a stream of consciousness narrative. And I think I've said this before in the past, but I think I'm more of an atmospheric horror guy. I like the world building. I love the unease, the unsettlingness of an environment. And you don't really get that in a book that is just like stream of consciousness of a character. And I also get like a little impatient with it sometimes. Like in Mary, there is this one point where Mary got bonked on the head by a character, and she was like trying to figure out who it was and why they seemed so familiar. And I was listening to the audiobook at the time, but I swear it was like 5 minutes of her being like, ooh, what's their name? Is it Alice? Betty? No, I think it starts with an E. Is it Emily? Eileen? And it's just like, girl, like wrap it up. Like, I know you just got bonked on the head, but I didn't. So like, get to the point a little faster. And I'm seeing similar patterns with Rest Stop. Another thing that I don't super love about Nat Cassidy's writing is the fact that although he writes about solitary characters, they still have like full-on conversations with like people in their head, question mark. In Mary, it was like semi-related to the plot. Like Mary was being possessed by a ghost, so it makes sense why she had another voice in her head and why she was able to have conversations with it. But in Rest Stop, Abe is just a guy. If it's later revealed that he's possessed by a something, fine. That'll feel a little bit like a cop-out because it'll just feel like Mary 2.0, but fine. It just feels a little bit like lazy writing because it's like, you want to write a solitary character, but you don't know how to, so you keep bringing in like pieces of dialogue and trying to fit it in some way or another. And so that's, yeah, I'm not super enjoying this part of the vlog. I'm glad this one is over and I'm glad that this one is so short, but I'm ready to move on to like another circle of hell. I did my workshop, and then I remembered I had another hour-long like webinar thing that I had to join, and they booked it for an hour for a 15-minute presentation, and I guess they were expecting a lot of action in the Q&A, but they spent the last 20 minutes practically on their knees begging for a question so that they could keep the presentation going. I left early. I have better things to do. Like this, apparently. I did finish Rest Stop. Everything that I already said hasn't changed, and I ended up giving this 2 stars. It was just, you know, it was fine. So that's out of my life. And we can move on to another book that I fear is likely gonna be just fine. And I feel like in part this is my fault. Like I chose relatively easy books for this readathon so that I could get through them and make the progress that I need to make to escape hell. And while I'm making progress, and that feels good, I'm still not quite satisfied because so far all of the books have been just fine. This is gonna accomplish the prompt of reading a book that has conflict in the synopsis, because this is a thriller, so conflict is kind of guaranteed. But more specifically, this is a thriller following a couple who went on vacation, and when they came back, only one of them returned. And so we're kind of trying to figure out what happened to Nina. I'm looking forward to this. This has been on my TBR for quite a bit. So I don't have like bottom of the barrel expectations. Like I have expectations, but they're not like through the roof. I'm expecting a lot from this. Like it's a thriller. Not to hate on a genre, but like, you know, there's a formula to a lot of thrillers that it's gonna be like a, yeah, well, that was that. I'm hoping it's not just that. I'm hoping it's more, but right now, given my last 2 and 3 star reads, I'm kind of at a lull where it just feels like every book is just gonna be like, bleh. Anyways, before I spiral, I'm gonna start reading What Happened to Nina. Yes! Anyways, it is Valentine's Day, so I know when I post this it's gonna be a little late, but like, if it's not too late, do you want to be belated Valentine's? And if not, that's fine too. But don't be surprised if I stop posting videos then, because I'll be too heartbroken. Anyways, I don't know what that was. It is Valentine's Day, and we are currently reading a book that is potentially about domestic abuse. So, hey, this is the same update, but it's been several hours later, as you can tell by the state of my braids. I was trying to wrap this up really quick and neat in the morning, but my heater loud. And then I had to jump into a work thing that was several hours long. And now we're here. And I don't remember what we were talking about. I can tell you that I'm 12 chapters into what happened with Nina. I'm about like a third of the way through and I'm intrigued. I think I said already the writing style isn't amazing, but I love the mystery. Just the mystery of it all always grabs me. Here's what we know. Nina was on a week-long vacation with her boyfriend and they were staying at his family's other house because his family is super rich and that's important to note. And while they were there, something happened and the boyfriend, Simon, went home Friday night and Nina didn't come back with him. He told this story about how they were on vacation, it was all well and good, but then she decided to break up with him and told him that she was cheating on him this whole time. And so he decided to leave Friday night and she was gonna stay the night at his family's home and then catch a ride the next day to go see a friend. And that's weird to me because if anyone was gonna leave, it would be the person whose family is not associated with the home, right? But whatever, that's his story. Basically, it's been several days. No one knows where Nina is. No one has been able to contact her. And so Nina's parents did have to get the police involved because now it's becoming more and more urgent. In his investigation, he spoke to one of Nina's friends who, according to Simon, Nina was going to see, but that friend never spoke to Nina and only received a bunch of weird texts that were like not in Nina's like typical tone. So it feels like Simon took her phone and wrote those text messages to create an alibi. I do not trust that family. I do not trust Simon or his mother or his scummy father because we haven't even spoke about the father yet, but we'll get there. The cops decided to do a press conference to get her name and face out there so people can start looking for her. And also as like a call out to Nina herself. If she's fine, she will see this on TV and be like, oh shit, my phone's dead and I should probably get back home. That's like the really optimistic scenario, which I don't think is gonna happen. But in doing that, it made Simon and his family look really suspicious, especially the way that Nina's parents phrased things. And so his father, some rich asshole, decided to hire a PR company so that they can do like a smear campaign on Nina's parents. And so they got like bot accounts to make these like TikTok videos being like, Nina's missing and at the press conference her mom looks fucked up and is talking super stiff and robotically. That's suspicious. Why isn't she more emotional about her missing kid? The idea is to make Nina's parents look suspicious and make them look like the people who did something to Nina, which as the reader only makes Simon and his family look that much worse. But like in the universe of this book, like nobody knows the intricacies of all of that. And I definitely think if it's not Simon, it's Simon's boy mom. You know, like it has to be one of them because they're being so weird about it. And also we just hate a boy mom. I don't want to see her be a hero in this story because I think she just sucks fundamentally as a character. And so don't know if that makes sense to you, but it sure made sense to me. Already finished What Happened to Nina. It really went downhill like once we found out what happened to Nina, which was around the like halfway mark. In some ways you can argue this isn't only a mystery thriller book. Like a lot of what this book is about grief and like family matters. There's a whole part that I did like that like explored social media and like the TikTokification of true crime and shit like that, and how like you can spin any story and people are just gonna latch onto it because it's not about finding the truth, it's about what's the most entertaining. And so like that I very much enjoyed in the second half, but like plot-wise, the second half was like really like boring. I ultimately gave this 2.5 stars. The next prompt is to read a book that you acquired recently. And to be honest, since I've posted my TBR, I have acquired newer books more recently, but I decided to stick with what I originally said I was going to read, which is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. And I've been listening to the audiobook as I've been doing like chores and crafts today. And I don't know if I'm enjoying it either. I'm already about halfway through and I like the parts where our narrator is discussing and criticizing late-stage capitalism and xenophobia and the rise of fascism and fast fashion and social media and things like that. But every single time she focuses on the man she wants to be with, I'm like, shut your mouth and let's move on. So for context, we are following an unnamed narrator, and she is obsessed with this man that she wants to be with. And not only is she obsessed with him, but she is obsessed with his ex-girlfriend, who is an influencer, so she's like cyber stalking her all the time too. And so the chapters are like short snippets of like thought where she jumps around from things like criticizing late stage capitalism to her relationship with this man that she wants to be with, to her boyfriend that she's not even in love with, to her education and her degree and what she's going to do with it and her hopes and her dreams. And so like in that way, it's really realistic. I did take a peek at some reviews and people described it as having like a FaceTime session with a friend. And like when you look at it through that perspective, I'm like, yeah, I can see that, but whatever. I feel like I can finish this in the next hour, which would lead us to our next prompt, which is to read a book with a food beverage on the cover and or title. We are planning to read Butter, but I fear that Butter might be too long because it's about like 400 something pages. So I'm contemplating whether I should go through my shelves to find a shorter book that features a food in the cover or the title, or if I just stick to my guns and try my best. Because it's only 4 p.m. right now, so if I can finish this in an hour, I can potentially read half of Butter throughout the day, and then I have all day tomorrow to read as much as possible, because tomorrow is our last day of the vlog. I don't know what we're gonna do yet after I'm a Fan, but first we have to finish I'm a Fan. Hi friends! It's the last day of the readathon, and I'm giving up. I can't do it. And I know I'm not gonna be able to do it, so I might as well just like have fun today. So I'm actually going to the movies now. But I did finish I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel last night, like I said I would. And I truly felt nothing for the piece. So I'm not even gonna rate it. It was just a book that I read. After I tried to read Butter with the intention of getting 200 pages in so that I could do half last night, half today. And I ended up reading 20 pages and then I fell asleep. So there's just no way I'm gonna read 400 pages today. And so I think that's it. Like, we've made it farther than last year. We read a lot of books already in the month of February, and that's great. Did I escape hell? No. Did I enjoy any of the books that I read while I was trying to escape hell? No. But the one silver lining is that I finally was able to tackle a bunch of books that I had on my TBR shelf, and I can confidently say I'm going to unhaul them. So we're freeing up space on my bookshelf, and that's huge. That's a win. My battery is about to die because I forgot to change batteries last night. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one where I'll read a 5-star book one day. One day, a book will make me feel feelings again. But this day, this week, this readathon was not the time. Bye!